Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Well, hello again. I'm Pastor Chuck Lewis, and this is my wife.
I'm Barbara.
And we're excited to be with you back on another program of Building Better Relationships. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm sure you can identify with. I know I can. And tell them what that topic is.
Today we're going to talk about defensiveness. Being defensive whenever somebody tries to talk to you about something, or the person that you're trying to confront is very defensive.
Yes. Boy, that's hard.
Yes.
Because when you're trying to talk to somebody and they're defensive, it's very hard to communicate.
Right. It makes it so that you can't talk about problems. And we're probably all defensive occasionally, but I think what is important to look at for yourself and the people you're having relationship with, especially your spouse, are they occasionally defensive, or is it a pattern where they're always defensive? Because whenever we're defensive, it's saying, I won't allow you to process problems with me. It's not giving the other person the right to complain and let them tell us the truth about ourselves. So that makes it so you don't process problems in the relationship. And when we don't process problems, they don't go away.
Right.
They just accumulate. But it can also mean that I'm not going to validate your concerns if you try to talk to me about something, because I'm just going to put it back on you, making it sound like I can't be the problem, so you must be the problem.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people know how to create problems, they just don't know how to resolve them. And if a person's very defensive, they're not open to resolve, they just want to argue. And that's very hard, to talk to somebody like that. Maybe you have somebody that you're dealing with right now at home or in business or whatever that's very defensive. I mean, I was teaching one time one of these tools and skills that we talk about here at a corporation, and I had never met this guy before, but I opened the door and he was walking in at the same time I was, and I said, boy, it's a great day today and beautiful weather, right? And he says, what's good about it? And I thought, wow, I mean, that all happened just from saying it's a great day today. But, somebody like that's just starts out defensive and angry, very hard to communicate with somebody like that. So let's talk about what you do with a defensive person. If they're just wanting to argue and fight and not resolve anything, the best thing to do is,
one thing we think would be good is to mirror back to the other person what you just heard them say.
Right.
Because they might not realize how it sounds.
Yes.
And so the mirroring skill is something we've taught on some of our other programs, where you kind of paraphrase back to the other person what you just heard them say.
And I've done that with people, and they couldn't even believe they said that.
Yes.
Yeah. So when somebody is in that mindset and they're irritated, they're aggravated, they've got a chip on their shoulders, so to speak. It's very hard to talk about anything. So basically, what you're saying is you just really need to set a boundary. You can mirror back,
yes,
and let them know what they said, and sometimes that can help, and they can change. But if they don't change their attitude, all you can do is draw a boundary and, try to talk about it at a different time, or maybe you can't talk about it at all. That's the frustrating part, because it's like an open computer an open program on our computer that's never closed out.
Right. And you mentioned something yesterday when we were talking about this that I thought was important. When you were having a conversation with someone and you could tell by the look on their face
Mm-hmm.
that they had heard something different than what you intended to say.
Right.
So you asked them, what did you just hear me say?
Right.
And so when they told you what they heard, it was entirely different than what you had said.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And in the world that we're living in today, there's so much going on and there's so much coming at us at one time. And sometimes we can be talking to somebody and they look like they're hearing us, but you don't know what they're hearing at all until they repeat that back to you.
Right.
Because just because you're communicating clearly doesn't mean they're hearing it clearly. And I asked a guy one time what they heard me say, and it was completely opposite of what I said. and I thought, wow, if we would have went by the interpretation that they heard, well, we definitely wouldn't have accomplished anything because what they heard was all negative. What I had said was positive, but what they heard was all negative.
Right. And a big reason why we can be defensive is that we're hearing things through our filter
Yes.
of life experience. I feel like I grew up with a lot of criticism. So I was very sensitive to criticism, and you had a hard time talking to me about anything I could do better or different because I would get defensive about it. And like you might say, you made a mistake in the checkbook, and what I heard is you're a bad person. And you're fat and you're ugly and all the things that I thought about myself.
Wow.
And that wasn't what was said at all. But if you have a negative filter, then you discount the positive and you hear everything as negative.
Absolutely.
So what are some other filters that somebody could have that would cause them to hear things wrong and be defensive?
Well, sometimes, there can be such a fear of rejection that a person can create rejection even before it happens because they believe they believe that's what the outcome's going to be. So they can reject the other person before that person has a chance to reject them.
Yeah.
And so, we can become like defense attorneys in talking about this topic to where, a defense attorney asks a question, but they're making more of a statement. They'll say things like, you weren't really there when that happened, were you? You didn't really see that person that came out of that building, did you? I mean, that's a question, but see, that's a conclusive question. And that's the way some people can communicate with each other. Right. And they're saying things in a conclusive way without truly asking the question.
Yeah, they've already made a judgment.
Yes.
And decided what the answer is.
Exactly.
Right.
So when you're talking to somebody that way and they're doing that, it's very hard to have a good result,
Right.
a good outcome.
Right. And whenever someone's defensive, it really causes you to have an unhealthy relationship because functional families talk about things, but dysfunctional families don't talk.
They don't
There
talk.
are silence and there's secrets. And I don't know if you've already all heard, we're only as sick as our secrets.
Yes.
They don't process things. Being defensive destroys intimacy and feelings of goodwill. It inhibits honesty and openness, and it actually locks problems into our relationships. So, for me, I feel like that is something I had to learn because I was very defensive, and my poor self-esteem told me I can't do anything right. If you're telling me I'm doing something wrong, I would globalize it and feel like I can't do anything right. And so I feel like I had to learn communication skills. And something that really helped me, Chuck and I learned a speaker listener technique when we got married. and we would each have a little business card. That's the size of it. And one of them was the speaker rules, and the other one was the listener rules. So when one person was speaking, the other person had to listen for the purpose of understanding. And a lot of times when we're listening, we're not really listening. We're thinking about what we're going to say.
Right.
So we're not listening to understand what the person is saying.
Right.
We're listening to see how we can answer them. And I also remember feeling like if you told me I did something that hurt you, I would want to tell you all the reasons why I didn't mean that, or you're too sensitive, or whatever, which again is putting it back on you instead of listening. And another thing I think that can cause defensiveness is old hurts that we have never processed. But I feel like when I learned the rules of engagement, the rules of communication, I learned to say to someone, what did I do that hurt you? Or one of your favorite questions is, what was I like to live with this week? And whenever you invite that, you need to be ready to hear the answer, but at least opens the door, so that you can hear.
I know when I first heard that question, I thought, I could never ask that because they might tell me.
Right.
Oh my God.
And I don't want to know.
I'm not going to open myself up to that. But see, again, I'm glad you brought that up, Barb, because in order to change patterns of the way we live and the way we communicate is to be open to do something different. And believe me, all these tools and skills are going to feel different to you if you practice these skills. But
yes.
if you practice them long enough, then the better way will feel more normal to you than the familiar way that's not working.
Yes.
Why keep doing something over and over that hasn't worked? If it's not worked before, it's not going to start working at any time. So you say, okay, that's not working for me. So why not be open to something, even though it feels bogus and it feels mechanical and all those titles that we can put to it? Why not try it if it's going to make the result better? And I'm so glad that you and I have worked on these things, even though it felt uncomfortable. It felt bogus to us too when we started doing these things. But the dysfunctional way never works, never will work. So why keep trying that over and over?
Right. Yes, I remember working on these communication skills with you, and it was new to me, but it really did help me to have the structure of the speaker listener where you take turns mirroring back what the other person said.
Yes.
I think at first I learned that I needed to hear what you thought and felt, but I didn't know I was ever going to get a turn to say that. So it took time, for me to learn these and actually use them. But one thing that I realized is that even if I didn't agree with you, I could still say I care about what you're feeling.
Right.
And even if I didn't understand it. And as you pointed out when we were talking about this, saying I care about your feelings is also a choice.
It's a choice.
We can choose to care even if we don't really care. Well, we can make a decision to care.
Make a decision to care. And that's a very good point in how to diffuse defensiveness. Now, it doesn't work 100% of the time, but it does work a lot of time to where you can just affirm the other person when they're very defensive. I think personally, from working with people over 50 some years of ministry, I think this is our 51st year or something of ministry. And what I found that a lot of people are defensive because they're trying to protect themselves.
That's
important. So when we're afraid of vulnerability because we've been hurt, a lot of people choose to be defensive because it runs people away from us. And therefore we don't feel as vulnerable if nobody's around. but that can be a very lonely way to live as well.
Yes.
And God is our safety.
Mhm.
He is the one that wants us to feel secure in Him. And the Gaithers sing a song, I am loved, I can risk loving you, because the one who knows me best loves me most. And I love that song because that's who we need to be vulnerable to first. If you've got a fear of vulnerability and you're very defensive, that's because you're trying to possibly protect yourself. So how you avoid that is you become vulnerable with the Lord first. You let Him heal those hurts within you.
Yes.
And bring those hurts to the Lord and tell Him He already knows what they are. So you're not surprising Him with anything. You're just providing information that He can heal you, and you can really be vulnerable to the Lord. And the more vulnerable you are to Him, then the more vulnerable you can be to each other.
Right. So not being defensive enables us to have more intimacy and closeness in our relationship.
Yes.
And, I think the way we say something to somebody can affect whether or not they're defensive about it too.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be using I messages. When you were late the other night, instead of attacking the person and saying you're always late or I can never count on you, you can say, I just felt unimportant when you
Yes.
were late and you didn't call
Right.
to let me know that you were going to be late. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm keeping it on me. I felt unimportant when that happened.
Yes.
And you would probably be less likely to be defensive about that.
Well, and a lot of times people react to that because then they think, well, you're judging me or you're accusing me of something or whatever. And they can be operating out of their own filter of abandonment, or maybe they've been cheated on in the past. So evil imagination starts going over in their minds, and they're thinking, wow, this person's late. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder who they're seeing or whatever. The Bible says to cast down all evil imagination and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. God doesn't want us to be caught up in evil imagination. He wants us to be caught up in Him and secure in Him.
Yes.
And now don't shout me down when I'm preaching good. That's what Jesse Duplantis says all the time. I love that. It's true though. It's very true. You go to the Lord with those fears and those hurts. You don't act them out with the other person. You give them to God and let the Lord heal you of those things, so that you're not defensive all the time and accusing everybody of the wrong things that you're imagining in your mind. You've got to give people the benefit of the doubt. And if we love the Lord first, we can run to Him and say, okay, God, I'm going to be vulnerable with you first, and then I'm going to really not react to these things that I'm feeling with this other person, but I'm going to run to the Lord with these feelings. I think it's important to run to the Lord initially with all these reactions and feelings.
Yes.
And then if we need to talk about it with the other person, we can.
Yes.
But God can heal us of those things, so we don't even need to talk about
He
it.
can. And I think as a couple, you can pray before you talk too. But I think the more you get to know each other, the more you know what each other's filters are.
Right.
It gives you some understanding of why the person is reacting the way they are, and it can give you more compassion. But I think approaching them with kindness, and we always say what you mean what you say, and don't say it mean.
Right.
When you say it mean, you're not going to get a good response.
Oh, no.
But if you can say it in a kind way, a caring way, you're more likely to get a good reaction.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of having our own healthy autonomy, because you can be a positive person. You can be affirming. You can affirm the other person, even if they never affirm you. the Bible said, eye has not seen and ears not heard what's in store for them that love him. So God loves you today, and he wants to set you free from all these hang-ups. Jesus was hung up for all of our hang-ups. Thank God for that. So God bless you today. We got to go, but write your comments on the bottom of the screen and tell us how we can pray for you. We love you today. God bless you. Go with God, and he will go with you.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.